It started on an unusually quiet Tuesday afternoon. Keanu Reeves had just returned from a long day on set, exhausted but satisfied. The crew had wrapped up the final scenes for his latest project, and all he wanted was a warm shower, a quiet dinner, and maybe an old book to end the day. The house was calm as usual. Maria, the maid who had worked for him for almost 3 years now, was tidying up the dining room, placing everything in its exact place like she always did. She moved like someone who had memorized silence, her steps never loud, her presence almost invisible. Keanu had always treated Maria with kindness, asking her if she'd eaten, offering her tea when he made some for himself. But like most busy people, he never really stopped to think about her life outside his home. She was always there, always working hard, always smiling politely. He knew nothing about her past, her family, or what she did after she left at 7 each evening. But that night, something felt different. As he passed by the kitchen, he noticed Maria folding a plastic bag with extreme care. Inside it was a sandwich, half an apple, and a bottle of water. She looked at the small package like it meant something more than food. Then she gently tucked it into her worn-out purse, glancing quickly over her shoulder as if she didn't want to be seen. Keanu leaned against the doorframe unnoticed. Something about that moment stayed with him. Maria left quietly, just as she always did. But this time, instead of settling into his usual routine, Keanu felt a strange urge to follow her. Not out of suspicion, not out of boredom, but because something in her eyes had looked heavy. Too heavy for someone who always carried herself so lightly. He slipped on a hoodie, grabbed his motorcycle keys, and waited until she turned the corner. Before starting his bike, he trailed her from a distance. She walked fast, clutching her purse to her side, weaving through crowded streets and dim alleys. Keanu kept low, his heart oddly pounding. He wasn't used to following people. He didn't know what he expected to find, but with every step she took, his curiosity grew. Finally, she stopped in a dark corner of a bus station parking lot. She looked around nervously, then ducked behind a row of old trash bins. Keanu parked his bike quietly and crept closer, hiding behind a light pole. What he saw next made his chest tighten. Maria knelt beside a small, shivering figure covered in blankets. It was a child, a girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Her face was pale, her eyes sunken. Maria took the sandwich from her bag and handed it to the girl with shaking hands. The child grabbed it hungrily and began eating as tears rolled down her cheeks. Maria stroked her hair gently, whispering words Keanu couldn't hear. He felt his throat tighten. She had a child. No one at the house knew. No papers, no mention, nothing. She had kept this hidden. And now here she was, giving away what little food she had. He watched her pull off her coat and wrap it around the child, even though the night was growing colder. Keanu couldn't move. Everything about the moment seemed to freeze time. He had never felt so useless just standing there. This wasn't a scene from a movie. This wasn't a character he could rescue with a line of dialogue or a heroic act. This was real, painfully real. He watched for a few more minutes. Then he quietly stepped back, returned to his motorcycle, and rode home in silence, his mind spinning with questions. Who was the girl? Why was Maria hiding her? What kind of life had she been living right under his nose? When Maria arrived at work the next morning, Keanu was already waiting. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at her, with eyes that had seen something they weren't supposed to. Maria froze, sensing something was off. "I went for a ride last night," he said slowly. "And I saw you." She went pale, her hand trembling as she placed a coffee mug on the counter. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Maria's lips quivered, but she didn't speak. "Was that your daughter?" he continued. She looked down, tears forming in her eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. Keanu felt a wave of emotion crash over him. "How long?" "Since she was born," Maria said, her voice low and broken. "I couldn't afford daycare. I couldn't find a safe place. I couldn't risk losing this job, so I kept her hidden. I feed her after work. I sleep with her in shelters or behind churches. I come to your house every day so she can eat." Keanu sat down, feeling like the floor had dropped from under him. The woman who had cleaned his home, folded his clothes, smiled when he offered tea, had been living in shadows just to keep her child alive. He looked at her again, really looked this time. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just shocked. He was ashamed. Ashamed that he had never noticed. Never asked, never cared enough to look beyond the surface. Then he stood up and said quietly, "Pack your things. You're not coming back here as my maid tomorrow." Maria looked confused, terrified. "You're coming back as my guest," Keanu said. "You and your daughter." Her eyes widened in disbelief, but before she could speak, he added, "And that's not an offer. It's a promise." But just as Maria was about to respond, her phone rang. Her hands shook as she answered it, her face turning white. She dropped the phone on the ground, her knees giving out beneath her. Keanu rushed to her side and grabbed the phone. The voice on the other end said 7 words that turned everything upside down. "Your daughter has been taken by someone else." Keanu froze for a moment as those 7 words echoed through the phone. "Your daughter has been taken by someone else." Maria's face was as pale as snow, her hands clutching her chest as if she had been struck by lightning. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't speak. She had just confessed a truth so heavy that her heart had barely begun to release it, and now the one thing she feared most had happened. Her little girl, the only reason she endured each sleepless night and every bone-aching day, was gone. Keanu helped her to a chair as she gasped for air, tears flowing uncontrollably. He held the phone to his ear, trying to understand what was happening on the other end. A woman's voice continued speaking, fast and urgent. She said she was a volunteer who worked nights at a rundown shelter near Venice Boulevard. She knew Maria and had seen her daughter before. She said that about half an hour ago, a man pretending to be Maria's cousin came in with papers and took the girl, claiming she had been abandoned and needed to be returned to family. But there was no cousin. Maria had no family in the country. The woman had called because something didn't feel right, something about the man's voice, his story, and the urgency with which he pulled the girl away. Keanu's mind raced. He gently set the phone down and knelt in front of Maria, gripping her hands firmly. "We're going to find her," he said, "I promise." Maria couldn't speak, her voice was lost in fear. All she could do was nod as sobs shook her shoulders. Within minutes, Keanu had his motorcycle keys in hand and was guiding Maria toward his black SUV. He didn't care about the cameras outside or whether the world would start gossiping about why Hollywood's beloved actor was seen speeding down Los Angeles streets with his housemaid. The only thing that mattered was that there was a scared, hungry child out there, alone, possibly in danger, and in the hands of someone they didn't know. The streets flew past in a blur as Keanu drove toward the shelter. Maria sat in the passenger seat, her fist clenched, whispering her daughter's name like a prayer. Sophia, Sophia, Sophia. It was the first time Keanu heard it. A beautiful name, fragile and soft, just like the little girl who had eaten a sandwich behind a dumpster the night before. When they reached the shelter, a thin woman with tired eyes met them outside. Her name was Lisa. She explained everything again, shaking her head, still in disbelief. "He had papers," she said. "Said he worked with social services. But he didn't look right. He was sweating, anxious. She didn't want to go with him, but the papers looked real. I didn't know what else to do." Keanu asked for the direction the man had gone. Lisa pointed toward the back alley where a van had been parked. "Gray Chevy," she said. "Plate number started with 7D. I tried to remember, but he peeled out so fast." Maria was trembling. "They found us," she whispered. Keanu turned. To her, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean they?" Maria hesitated. Then, like a dam finally giving in, she spoke. "My husband," she said, her voice hollow. "Sophia's father. I left him 7 years ago. He was a violent man, angry and dangerous. He hurt me many times. Almost killed me once. When I found out I was pregnant, I ran. Changed my name. Worked as a dishwasher, then a maid. I never filed a police report because I was scared they would find me. No one ever knew where we were. I thought we were safe." Keanu clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a missing child. This was something deeper, darker, the kind of story that people ignore until it becomes a headline. He stepped aside and made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in months. His old friend Jonas, a private investigator who had once helped track down a missing costume designer's son in under a day. Within 20 minutes, Jonas joined them at the shelter. He had gray stubble, a leather coat, and a calmness that only came from seeing too much in life. He listened without interrupting, then began working quickly, checking camera feeds from nearby buildings, calling a contact at the DMV to track plates and sketching the face of the man based on Lisa's description. "We'll find him," Jonas said quietly. "But this isn't just a kidnapping. If this man is who she thinks he is, then he's coming back. And he's not afraid of anything." As hours passed, the clues slowly came together. A gas station. Camera 3 blocks away had caught the gray van turning east. Another camera from a pawn shop recorded it moving past 20 minutes later. The trail was thin but still alive. Keanu drove with Maria and Jonas to every lead, each time hoping it would be the one that ended the nightmare. By the time midnight came, Maria was barely able to keep her eyes open, but she refused to stop. Keanu sat beside her, watching her stare out the window with a hollow look that tore at his soul. He didn't know how someone could live through so much pain and still smile like she had all these years. He suddenly remembered how she would hum softly while mopping the floor, how she folded his laundry with perfect edges, how she once brought him soup when he had the flu, saying her grandmother taught her the recipe. She had lived like a ghost beside him, never asking for help, never seeking pity. And now she was broken. Because the one person who gave her life meaning had vanished into the night. Then, just past 2 a.m., Jonas got a hit. A parking ticket had been issued 2 hours earlier to a gray van matching the description in a forgotten part of the city. A place filled with abandoned warehouses and broken windows. The location wasn't safe, but none of them hesitated. As they neared the warehouse, the streets grew darker and colder. The van was there, parked sloppily near the edge of the lot. Keanu's heartbeat thundered in his chest. Maria's hands trembled. Jonas signaled for silence. They moved slowly, carefully, each step heavy with fear. Then they heard it. A muffled cry. It came from the back of the warehouse. Maria took off running before anyone could stop her, screaming her daughter's name. Keanu followed close behind, his heart in his throat. They found her tied to a chair, her eyes wide with terror, her arms bruised. She wasn't alone. A man with wild eyes stood nearby, holding something metallic. When he saw Maria, he yelled. He lunged toward them, rage burning in his expression. Keanu didn't think. He rushed forward, tackling the man to the ground with a force he didn't know he still had. Jonas arrived seconds later and pinned the man down, pulling a knife from his jacket. Maria collapsed into Sophia's arms, sobbing, whispering promises she had waited years to make. But even as sirens echoed in the distance and as police lights began to glow through the warehouse windows, Keanu couldn't shake one question from his mind. Who tipped off Sophia's father about where she was, and why now, after 7 years of silence? The flashing red and blue lights from the police cars reflected off the broken warehouse windows, bathing everything in an eerie glow. Officers swarmed the place, shouting commands, placing the man who had taken Sophia into handcuffs and quickly checking the little girl for injuries. Paramedics examined her while Maria refused to let go of her daughter's hand. She knelt beside Sophia, her hair tangled, her eyes red, her voice a trembling whisper of prayers and relief. Keanu stood silently just outside the chaos, watching it all unfold. His fists were clenched, not from fear but from a new kind of fury, one born from witnessing something so wrong that it shook the foundations of what he thought he understood about the people closest to him. The police questioned Maria gently at first, but soon their tone changed. One of the officers pulled Keanu aside and said quietly, "We ran the man's record. His name is Ricardo Alvarez. He has a long history, domestic violence, assault, possession. He fled Mexico after a court case involving organized trafficking, then disappeared into the U.S. under a false name. We believe this was planned, and he might not have acted alone." Those words sent chills through Keanu. His mind instantly returned to Maria's face earlier that day, her eyes full of unspoken fear, her voice trembling when she said, "They found us." It hadn't been paranoia. It had been a warning. This wasn't just a violent ex-husband trying to reclaim what he lost. It was something deeper, more calculated and more dangerous. After the chaos settled and Sophia was cleared to leave, Keanu brought Maria and her daughter back to his home. She didn't protest. She didn't have the strength to. He gave them the guest room, the softest blankets, warm soup, and a promise. "You are safe now." But even as he said the words, he knew safety was no longer something he could guarantee without knowing the full truth. And he needed to know. He needed to understand what Maria had really been running from all these years. The next morning, as the sun rose quietly over the hills, Keanu sat with Maria in the garden. The air was cold but peaceful. Birds chirped in the distance, unaware of the war that had erupted beneath the surface of the ordinary. Maria looked exhausted, older somehow, like a lifetime had passed in just one night. Keanu poured her tea, then sat beside her and said gently, "Tell me everything, no more secrets." Maria looked at the steam rising from her cup and took a long breath. Then she began. "I wasn't always a maid," she said. "In Mexico, I studied nursing. I wanted to work in a hospital. My father was a good man, and my mother sang to me every night. We lived a simple life. Then I met Ricardo. He was charming, powerful. He had money. People feared him, but I was young and blind. I didn't know where his money came from until it was too late. By the time I was pregnant, I had seen too much. Drug shipments, corrupt officials. Things I'll never forget. When I tried to leave, he beat me so badly I thought I would die. That night I escaped through the window with nothing but a small bag and my unborn child." She paused, her voice cracking. "I crossed the border with help from a woman I barely knew. I gave birth to Sophia in a shelter in Arizona. Then I kept moving. New names, new cities, always hiding. I cleaned houses, washed dishes, worked night shifts. Anything to survive. I thought Ricardo would never find us. But last year, someone from the past spotted me. I was cleaning the lobby of a fancy building and one of his old associates walked by. I saw the way he looked at me. That's when I stopped sleeping. I knew the clock had started ticking." Keanu listened, his heart heavy. She hadn't just been surviving, she had been carrying a silent war inside her every day. And yet through all of it, she had shown up at his home smiling softly, cleaning with grace, never once asking for more than her paycheck. "Why didn't you come to me?" he asked. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with something too deep for words. "Because people like you live in the light," she said, "and people like me survive in the shadows. I didn't want to pull you into the darkness I came from." Keanu looked away, ashamed of how blind he had been to the pain of someone standing right in front of him. That evening, Jonas returned with updates. "Ricardo had help," he said. "Someone gave him Maria's location. Someone with access to her routine, her schedule, even the shelter address. We traced calls made from a burner phone near the neighborhood where you live. And get this, it's someone connected to the agency that recommended Maria to you." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "You mean someone from the staffing company?" Jonas nodded. "They run background checks, they assign maids to clients like you. Someone in that office sold her information. Probably didn't even know what it would be used for. Just saw the money and took it." Keanu stood up, furious. "We need names." "Already working on it," Jonas said. "But there's more. Ricardo was part of something bigger, not just drugs, women, children, trafficking networks that stretch across borders. And now that. He's been arrested, the people he worked with might want to clean up loose ends." Maria overheard the last part. She clutched Sophia tighter. Keanu walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You won't be a loose end," he said firmly. "Not while I'm breathing." The next few days were tense. Keanu increased security around his home, hired 2 former Marines to stand guard, and arranged for Maria and Sophia to see a trauma specialist. But he knew this wasn't enough. Not when the roots of the threat reached deep into a system that valued money more than lives. So he did something he had never done before. He went public. With Maria's permission, He told her story, without names, without faces, on a late-night talk show. He spoke not as a celebrity, but as a man who had witnessed something that shook him to his core. He talked about invisible workers, hidden pain, broken systems, and the danger of turning a blind eye to the suffering of others. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just spoke the truth with the weight of someone who had seen behind the curtain, of comfort. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in for shelters. Reporters began asking questions about the staffing agency. Activists called for new protections. Maria, for the first time in years, stepped outside without looking, over her shoulder. But just when they thought the worst was over, Jonas came with news that turned their blood cold. Ricardo had a partner, he said, someone who stayed in the shadows, and that person is still out there, and they know who you are now, Keanu. It had been 4 days since Sophia was rescued, and Keanu's once quiet home had turned into a fortress. Armed guards rotated shifts at the gates. Jonas set up a surveillance system with motion sensors, cameras, and drones scanning every corner. Maria rarely left Sophia's side, and even the young girl, despite her fragile age, seemed to carry a weight that didn't belong to childhood. She no longer smiled easily. Her drawings became darker. She flinched at sudden sounds. Every laugh or warm moment was quickly followed by silence, as if they feared happiness might attract danger. Keanu did everything he could. He cooked for them, read bedtime stories, even let Sophia ride his motorcycle around the driveway while he walked beside her. But something was always lurking in the background. It wasn't just fear. It was something more, like unfinished business waiting to strike. Jonas's words rang in Keanu's ears constantly. Ricardo had a partner. And that person is still out there. Keanu had faced villains in movies, played characters who brought justice with fists, bullets, or vengeance. But this wasn't fiction. This wasn't a script. This was real life. And the stakes were not box office ratings. They were blood, memory, and lives that couldn't be reset between takes. So he started digging deeper, asking questions, reaching out to people he hadn't spoken to in years. Journalists, immigration attorneys, underground activists, even an old stunt coordinator who had connections in places most would never dare enter as they investigated the staffing agency that originally placed Maria in his home. A name kept surfacing. Raul Mendonza. He was the regional manager. Barely visible in public, never showed his face on the website, but he signed the checks and made the deals. More importantly, he had a history of working for companies that vanished suddenly after federal investigations. He had 3 passports, 7 phone numbers, and a reputation for always staying 2 steps ahead. Jonas found a lead through an anonymous tip from a former maid who had once worked under his agency. She claimed that Raul ran a secret list, tracking undocumented workers not for their safety or well-being, but as leverage. When someone became too visible, too vocal, or too inconvenient, their location was quietly sold to people willing to pay. Traffickers, debt collectors, violent ex-partners. Maria had been one of those names. Keanu couldn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, staring out at the hills, the city lights in the distance flickering like faint stars. Everything looked so peaceful on the surface. But underneath was a world so cruel, so carefully hidden, that even someone like him, famous, wealthy, connected, hadn't seen it until now. He thought about all the people who passed by Maria, without knowing her story, all the nights she cried silently in some cold alley holding her child while the world moved on. It made him sick. It made him angry. And it made him determined. The next day, Jonas traced Raul to a private event being held at a luxury hotel downtown. A silent auction, invitation only. No press, no cameras. The kind of event where power was exchanged behind champagne glasses and fake smiles. Keanu didn't hesitate. He put on a suit, slipped in through a back entrance with Jonas, and began scanning the room. It wasn't long before they spotted him. Raul was standing near a fireplace, surrounded by 3 men in tailored suits. His smile was sharp, his eyes cold. He didn't notice Keanu at first, but when he finally looked up and saw who was approaching, the smile faded instantly. Keanu stopped only a foot away, his voice low and calm. "We need to talk." Raoul blinked, slowly, then laughed. "I'm sorry, but I don't talk business with actors." Keanu didn't flinch. "You do when a little girl's life was nearly destroyed because of you." Jonas stepped forward, showing his badge. "We know you sold Maria's file. We also know you have ties to Ricardo's network." Raoul smirked. "Prove it." Keanu stepped closer, his voice like steel. "You already proved it. Your silence is louder than any confession." The tension in the room shifted. People began watching. Someone whispered Keanu's name. Raoul's calm cracked slightly, but he quickly composed himself. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with. And you have no idea who I'm protecting," Keanu replied. Raoul turned, tried to leave, but Jonas blocked his path. "The feds will be knocking on your door by morning. You can cooperate now or rot later." Raoul cursed under his breath, then shoved past them, disappearing into the crowd. Jonas didn't chase him. He didn't need to. They already had enough. While Raoul was busy talking, another contact of Jonas's had accessed his hotel suite and downloaded the contents of his laptop. It contained files, names, addresses, photos, payments. Maria's file was there, along with dozens more. When they returned home that night, Keanu didn't say much. He just sat with Maria, showing her the folder. She stared at it with wide, horrified eyes, realizing how close she had come to losing everything. Then she asked the question that had been buried inside her heart since the beginning. "How many more?" "Too many," Keanu said softly. "But now we know." The next morning, the story broke. Jonas handed the files to a trusted journalist. Headlines exploded across the internet. Celebrities unknowingly hired maids from a trafficking-linked agency. Keanu Reeves helps uncover illegal labor network. Suddenly, Maria's story wasn't just hers. It belonged to hundreds, and people began to listen. Calls poured in. Interviews were requested. Maria declined them all. She didn't want fame. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted peace. But peace was still far away, because that night, as the house finally settled and Keanu began to believe maybe, just maybe, they had won something, one of the guards found a note taped to the back gate. No cameras had caught it. No one had seen who left it. But the handwriting was sharp and rushed. It read, "You took one of ours. Now we take two." Jonas read it 3 times, then looked at Keanu. "This isn't over," he said. Keanu looked at Sophia through the window, sleeping beside Maria. "Then neither are we," he whispered. The house that once echoed with silence now felt like a ticking clock. Every second passed with a tension that tightened the air. Guards doubled at the gates. Every window was checked, locked, reinforced. Jonas and his team ran surveillance day and night, reviewing footage frame by frame, analyzing license plates, watching shadows. But even with all the protection, there was something more dangerous than any weapon: uncertainty. That note taped to the gate had changed everything. "You took one of ours. Now we take 2. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. Keanu had never felt fear like this before, not for himself, but for those he had come to love. Maria had become more than his maid, more than someone who once folded his clothes and scrubbed his floors. She had become family. Sophia, with her quiet laughter and wounded eyes, had become something he didn't even realize he'd needed: hope. And now, both of them were in danger again. Not because they had done something wrong, but because evil doesn't care who you are when money and secrets are at stake. Jonas was in full gear now, treating this not like a threat, but like a war. His team was armed, trained, and positioned across the estate. Yet Keanu still felt something wasn't right. He had played enough roles in films about betrayal, about enemies hiding in plain sight to recognize the signs. The enemy wasn't just outside. Someone was feeding them information. Someone close. Someone who knew the security rotation, who knew when the cameras blinked offline for maintenance, who knew where Sophia liked to play in the garden, And when Maria took her evening walks around the lemon trees, Keanu began watching the watchers. He reviewed footage himself, frame by frame. He paid attention to movement patterns. He noticed how one guard, Mason, always took longer breaks than assigned, how he would step out of frame for just a minute during critical rotations. Jonas dismissed it at first, saying it was probably nothing. But Keanu insisted. Run his name again. Check everything. I don't care how clean he looks. 2 hours later, Jonas returned with a file in his hand, his face grave. Mason was hired through a private security firm we've used for years. He has no criminal record. Nothing flagged. But his real name isn't Mason. It's Elias Cruz. 3 years ago, he was arrested in Texas under suspicion of smuggling, but released due to lack of evidence. And get this, his last known associate before dropping off the map was Raul Mendonza. Keanu's stomach turned. He's in the house. He's been in the house for 3 days, Jonas replied. They moved quickly, quietly, a silent sweep through the east wing where Mason had been assigned. But when they reached the room, it was empty. His duffel bag was gone. His radio was discarded on the ground. Jonas cursed under his breath. He's ahead of us. Panic surged through Keanu. He ran down the hall, yelling for Maria. Guards scrambled, sweeping every corner. Then someone shouted from the garden, "They're gone!" Keanu's feet pounded the marble floor as he raced through the back door. The garden gate was open. The lemon tree branches were broken. A trail of crushed grass led to the back road, hidden from the cameras. A tire track. Size 11 boot prints. Jonas scanned the scene. He took them. How long ago? Keanu asked. Not more than 20 minutes, Jonas replied. Keanu turned without a word, jumped into his motorcycle gear, and started his engine. Track his phone. Check every gas station camera within 30 miles. Start the drone. Jonas nodded, already calling his team. The chase had begun. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the roads blurred. Keanu rode faster than he had in years, his body moving on instinct, his mind burning with fury and fear. Maria and Sophia, somewhere out there, in the hands of a man who didn't care about lives, only orders. His hands gripped the handlebars tighter. Every second mattered. A lead came in. A stolen sedan had run a red light near Glendale. A girl was seen in the back seat crying. The car turned toward the canyons, into a place where cell signals dropped and roads narrowed into silence. Keanu followed, headlights cutting through the growing darkness, heart pounding with every mile. Then he saw it. The car, parked near the edge of an old canyon trail, abandoned. Keanu jumped off his bike, scanned the area. Branches cracked in the distance. Footsteps. He followed them, weaving through brush and stone. Then he heard a voice. Low. Threatening. You should have stayed hidden, Maria. You brought this on yourself. Keanu moved faster, ducking behind a tree. He saw them. Elias, had Maria on her knees, a knife to her throat. Sophia sat tied to a tree nearby, whimpering. Her small eyes met Keanu's for just a second. She didn't scream. She didn't cry louder. She simply looked, and in that look, Keanu saw everything. Fear, trust, and a desperate plea. Keanu stepped out slowly, hands raised. Let them go, he said. Elias laughed. You think being famous makes you a hero? This is bigger than you. Bigger than her. There are people who pay millions to erase stories like hers. Keanu's voice was calm, steady. You want me? Fine. Take me. But let them go. Elias tightened his grip on Maria. You don't get to make deals. But then a voice echoed from behind the trees. Jonas. You don't either. Suddenly, lights flashed. Men moved from the shadows. Elias turned, startled. In that split second, Maria elbowed him hard in the ribs, breaking free. Keanu lunged forward, tackling Elias to the ground, fists slamming into the man's face with all the rage he had held back. When it was over, Elias lay, unconscious, zip-tied by Jonas's team. Maria hugged Sophia so tightly the girl could barely breathe. Keanu sat beside them, panting, blood on his knuckles, eyes locked on the night sky. No one spoke for a while. There was only breathing, only the sound of a mother and child reunited once, again. But as the team loaded Elias into the black truck and prepared to leave the canyon, Jonas turned to Keanu and said something that hit harder than any punch. "This is just one man," he said. "The others, they're still out there, and they know your name now." Keanu looked at the stars above, then at Sophia curled in Maria's arms. "Then they'll learn what my name really means," he replied softly. The air was colder when they returned from the canyon. The sun had not yet risen, but the world felt different, like it had been cracked open. Maria and Sophia were silent in the back seat, both wrapped in a blanket, both staring out the window as if unsure whether what had happened was real or just a nightmare they had managed to outrun. Keanu sat in the front, hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't thinking about his career, or his next script, or the awards that filled his shelves. He was thinking about how many others like Maria were out there, how many mothers were still hiding, how many children slept in fear, waiting for someone, anyone, to care. Jonas sat beside him, bruised but alive, scanning his phone for updates. The man they captured, Elias, had started to talk, not out of guilt, but out of fear. He gave names, addresses, meeting points, and something else. He revealed that a politician, someone highly ranked and well-connected, had funded part of the operation that helped Raul and Ricardo move women across borders. It wasn't just a crime syndicate. It was a network, a system powered by money, fear, and silence. And now, with Keanu involved, that silence was breaking. The moment they reached home, Keanu made 2 calls. The first was to his lawyer, a woman named Melinda, who had spent her entire career fighting for the unheard, the forgotten, the undocumented. She came immediately, listened to Maria's full story, and said 5 words that felt like thunder. "We're taking this to court. Below." Second call was to a foundation Keanu had quietly funded for years, one that provided scholarships for underprivileged youth. He told them to redirect every resource they had to launch a new branch, one that would focus on protecting women like Maria, one that would provide housing, legal aid, and education for undocumented families escaping violence. And he didn't want it hidden. He wanted it loud, visible, untouchable. 3 days later, the world erupted. Every news channel ran the story, not just about the trafficking ring, but about Keanu Reeves, an actor who had gone beyond the screen, who had risked everything to save the people most had ignored. Maria's name was protected, but her story was shared, with her blessing. She said, "If my pain helps protect one more mother, it was worth it." People marched, laws were questioned, investigations were reopened, raids were made on warehouses, staffing offices, and fake shelters. And the politician Elias had named, he resigned 2 weeks later. Charges followed. But for Keanu, the real story wasn't about justice in courtrooms. It was about something quieter, something deeply personal. He sat with Maria and Sophia one evening as the wind moved gently through the lemon trees. Maria was stronger now, still quiet, still humble, but no longer hiding. Sophia had begun smiling again. She painted pictures of animals and stars, and sometimes of a tall man on a motorcycle with a golden dog beside him. Keanu asked her once what it meant. She just said, "It's the man who watches the sky and keeps us safe." Keanu smiled, but inside he felt something shift. He had lived a full life. He had made movies, changed lives on screen. But nothing compared to this. Nothing had filled the spaces inside him quite like the laughter of a child who had known too much pain, or the gentle voice of a woman who had once whispered prayers in alleyways, now finally sleeping without fear. So one morning, just before dawn, Keanu sat Maria down at the kitchen table. He poured her tea the way she used to do for him and said calmly, "I want you to take the house." Maria stared at him confused. "What?" "This home," he said. "It's yours now. I've already signed the documents. I'll move out by the end of the week." Maria stood shaking her head. No, Keanu, I can't. This isn't. Yes, you can, he interrupted gently. You already saved it. You made this place a home long before I realized it. You raised your daughter. Here, you deserve peace, and besides, I have other plans. She sat back down, tears filling her eyes. Where will you go? Keanu looked out the window. Wherever the next mother needs help, wherever the next child hides behind a broken door. I have a voice, I have a name, and I finally know what to do with them. He stood and walked to the hallway where Sophia was drawing on the wall with chalk. She looked up at him with a smile. Are you leaving? Keanu knelt beside her. Only for a while. She hugged him tight. You'll come back, he smiled. If you ever need me, I'll be there. 2 days later, Keanu Reeves vanished from the spotlight. No press release, no interviews, just a note left behind with 3 words. Find the forgotten, and somewhere across the city, in a small apartment filled with the smell of jasmine tea and lemon trees. Maria looked out at the stars, holding Sophia close, knowing that the man who once followed her down a quiet street had changed not only her life, but the lives of countless others who would never know his name, but would always feel his impact.